Hey there, this is Laura Williamson. Welcome to Bear Fitness. Today is going to be an exciting show. Today's topic is, why is it so hard for men to make friends? What's that all about? But because I have a guest today, I want to introduce you. Please welcome David Watts Jr., and he's going to answer all the hard questions for me today. All right, that's the plan. All right, so bear with me, bear with us. We're going to have a little fun with it today. Don't forget, second part of this segment of the show is going to be a workout. So if you want, please hang around for that or watch that at another time. But you definitely want to stick around for today's topic. I think this is going to be beneficial for a lot of people. I actually myself am excited because I think I'm going to learn a lot because it's going to give me a new perspective on things. So I'm just going to start right out. David, hi.
Hi.
It's nice to see you here. Thank you for
as
joining
well.
me today.
You're welcome.
This is
You're welcome.
This is going to be a lot of fun. All right, I'm going to jump right in, if that's okay.
Yeah.
First and foremost, tell us about yourself. What do you do, David?
I'm a photographer, filmmaker, and historian based here in Wakefield, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And I've been doing this all my life.
Mm-hmm.
My dad taught me photography as a child and picked it up. And then by the time I was in high school, I was doing yearbook and portraits and whatever. And so even to this day, I do a lot of portraits. I do a lot of editorial work. I write for several magazines as well as photograph, photo essays. I also do a lot of the coverage out at the American Heritage Museum out in Hudson, Massachusetts, which is a museum of armor from 1918 to 2006.
Okay.
And I've been involved with the Collings Foundation, which runs that since 2007. Did a documentary film on them early on and just haven't escaped.
All right. So you like history. You're a history buff of sorts.
I grew up in a family of amateur historians.
Okay.
And was involved with the Wakefield Historical Society when I was in high school. And it's always been a part of what I do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, very cool. So even though we're talking about what David does, David is visiting us today because David and I, we met some time ago, but David and I, we've also had some awesome conversations. But one of the conversations that we had more recently was about the topic here of the challenges that men can sometimes have when it comes to having friends, making friends, keeping friends. And, you know, as a woman, I'll be honest, why I got to ask, why is that? What is the problem? What's going on? Like, what can we do to help? And so I'll start with, tell us a little bit about your interests. Like, what do you do in your time, in your social time when you're not working? Because I can hear that you love what you do. But what do you do to be social?
I mean, you know, this is all from my perspective and my life experiences. And quite honestly, I've always had close friends. And that's always been important to me in my life. You know, for a long time, I had a best friend who was originally from India. He has since sadly passed away. But, you know, and it just, I grew up in a fairly social family. So, so knowing people, meeting people from different backgrounds was always something that to me is always exciting, still to this day. Drives some of the magazine work that I do. You know, for instance, last December, right after Christmas, I got a call from the museum out in Hudson, and they said, we have a 101-year-old World War II vet coming Thursday. Think you can come out there? This was the week between the holidays. It's like, yeah, I'll be there.
Okay.
And long story short, you know, because I took both still and video equipment out with me, I didn't videotape him that day because Channel 5 was doing a segment.
Okay.
And so I was invited to his home a week later, and Russell gave me 3 hours of his
Nice.
reminiscences on World War II,
Mm-hmm.
which the video will be in the archive out at the museum for people to view. But, and we've stayed in contact ever since. I just heard from his daughter the other day, you know, to be prepared to be out there December 27th for his 102nd birthday.
Wow.
So my best friend and I will be heading out there for his birthday party.
I mean, it sounds like you have a pretty fun job, but it also sounds like because of the type of job that you do and the interest that you have, it sounds like it's fairly easy for you to meet people and make new connections. Or am I, if I'm understanding
Oh, no,
you the correct way?
absolutely. You know, sometimes you meet people. I was doing an article on Gwillows, which is makes model airplanes here in Wakefield. It's been around for over 100 years. No, I'm sorry, almost 100 years.
Right.
And, you know, I needed someone who built Gwillows models for the article, and found a gentleman out in Leominster. And, you know, after doing the interview and everything, he's a jazz fan. We ended up in Franklin to hear a Kenny Hadley band perform not too long after, but he was telling me about he's retired now, but he does a radio show every Wednesday at WICN in Worcester, which is an all jazz station. It's one of the last jazz stations in the Northeast.
Love jazz, by the way.
And you'd love this, WICN.org.
Okay.
And Al does the Wednesday 3 to 6 Standard Time program. And so I ended up doing an article on WICN, spent a day out there earlier this year photographing and interviewing the staff and some of the DJs.
Very nice.
You know, so they build on things, you know. And, you know, sometimes opportunities come you don't expect.
Oh, those are the best when they do come, though,
You know,
I find.
most recently, my best friend is Richard Binder up in Nashua, who is recognized as one of the top 6 fountain pen restorers in the world. We met by accident 20 years ago at a pop-up pen show down in Providence, Rhode Island. And he's also a historian. He started working with me out at Collings as a second camera 10 years ago. And in fact, we were out there covering Battle for the Airfield back in October. And, you know, over the years, he and I have become best friends. And just out of the blue, because of a 1956 movie I had been looking at, we started a project researching dip and dipless pen sets from the 1930s to the 1960s. We have an article that is out in the October issue of Pen World, Part 1. Part 6 will be published next August. It's a bi-monthly magazine. And then we will be following with a book on the subject about this time next year. But, you know, this just kind of came out of the blue, and once we got hooked, it's like, yeah, we're not going to get out of this one very easily.
Yeah, I love it. All right. I mean, okay, so in my mind and in my experience, and again, obviously I'm female, I'm not male, I have found that in the course of my life, I have made friends, obviously when I went to school, but I find it per job, like I feel like every 10 years I'm making friends, is what I feel like, right? So, and all that being said, again, it's not easy coming by. I mean, you meet people all the time, you have acquaintances, but when I say friends, I mean people where you're not afraid to call them, you can pick up the phone like, hey, you want to get together, you want to do something. And, you know, we got to talking about friendship. And then I also found this awesome article in the New York Times, exactly called "Why Is It So Hard for Men to Make Close Friends," by Catherine Pearson from June of this year. And it touches on some of these things about childhood, growing up as a boy, and how, boys are socialized a little bit differently than girls
Mm-hmm.
are, and how they interact with one another in relationships. And so obviously you spend time with friends and you have mutual interests and you're
Mm-hmm.
meeting people, but more importantly, it seems like you're not afraid to show the interest and the enthusiasm with the person that you have met. Like, oh, you know what, we have mutual interests, let's go and do something
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
And actually this is one of the things that comes up in this particular article. It talks about ways to make friends going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so it also mentions how American men are stuck in what she calls a friendship recession. This is all post-COVID. This is all post-COVID.
Okay.
So these are words.
What is a friendship recession?
This is what it says. It says friendship recession. So it's all very interesting. So and it says they explore, or she's exploring,
Mm-hmm.
adult friendship
Mm-hmm.
amongst men, and how some of the reasons, or what's considered valuable to men in relationships, or usually aren't relationships aren't the first thing, but
Mm-hmm.
it's success in life. Doesn't necessarily include friendship, but these are some of the things that are important to success
Mm-hmm.
for men, is having a family, competitive workplace, making money. I mean, there's a few different things that she mentions here, but then, since COVID, since the pandemic, she also mentions here, and this has been an ongoing thing, that
Mm-hmm.
loneliness and male friendships have been challenging for many, but since COVID, it's even worse. The amount of loneliness that has happened for a lot of men. And so she, quote, says, men have been convinced that success in life does not necessarily include friendship. That if they're successful at work and they've started a family,
Mm-hmm.
they've won.
See, I would have to disagree with that.
Yeah.
Just in my own life experiences. I belong to a group, it's an informal group that meets for lunch once a month, first Friday of the month. Been part of this group now for almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we call ourselves the Old Fart Press Photographers of the North Shore.
I love it.
Okay? It doesn't mean everyone in there is elderly.
Right.
I mean, I was, in my 40s when I first started joining them for lunch up in Danvers, and but it's open to men and women, and we've had a couple of women press photographers who have been members. There aren't a lot of women press photographers in the area, unfortunately, But even during COVID, we continued having our regular meetings on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I hate things like technology between me and a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But we had our meetings. So a couple of members who, one was teaching in Shanghai at the time, one is teaching at a college in Georgia, was able to join us that weren't able to join us, and one up in Newfoundland. Mm-hmm. But we kept that going. In a similar manner, a small group of us within a group that I run in the area called Boston Pen People, we would have Zoom meetings through COVID. And mostly this was kind of a core group because there are 400 members of Boston Pen People around the eastern Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire area. And so we kept those meetings going so that there was a continuity until we came out of COVID. It isn't impossible to do, which is why I find it very hard to kind of relate to what you were just reading. Okay. Seems to be the norm in America.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Not my experience.
A lot of people had difficulty with that very thing, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there was also what I'll call Zoom burnout. Like, people after a while got so tired of being on Zoom, and but
I won't do Zoom now.
Yeah, but a lot of, I can imagine, again, Zoom burnout.
Yeah.
But there are so many people who didn't take that opportunity or do that or take the time to to stay in touch that way. A lot of people lost contact. I mean, you know, people seem to be having an extremely challenging time right now post-COVID for a variety of reasons. And even, again, in this article, one of the things that also comes up that she mentions is, again, we appear to be stuck. You know, American men are stuck. You know, how do we, I mean, what do we do? She gives a couple of solutions to help allay or alleviate some of these things. Or when I say solutions, she gives ideas. You know, she says, practice vulnerability, even if it makes you uncomfortable. That's one of the things, one of the solutions.
But isn't that part of showing vulnerability?
But again, think about it. Again, we're talking about socialization, right?
Yeah,
so how many men feel like they can truly be vulnerable with someone else? You know, she mentions, you know, it's mentioned in her article, she recommends that if you talk to someone, you know, tell them how you're feeling, tell them what's going on, tell them something's concerning you, like share.
Right.
You know?
Right.
How many people do that? I mean, do you share?
Yes.
Are you vulnerable? Have you always been that way, though? And does it come easy?
It's hard to answer that question because it's such an ingrained part of my personality. I don't really, it's not something that I think about consciously as to, you know, I am just, whatever personality you perceive, you know, is what I am. Is the easiest way to say it.
Okay.
You know, I think part of the difference is that, and I don't want to generalize too much, but you know, I've been exposed to so many different things over the course of my lifetime that I have a different view of the world than maybe the average American male today. I don't know. I honestly don't know, but wouldn't have it any other way.
Okay, and then she also mentions, don't assume that friendships happen organically. Like, don't assume, I'm just gonna, this is rough, this is not what she's saying, but I'm gonna say, don't assume someone's gonna come ring your doorbell and say, hey, let's be friends. Like, it's my understanding that friendship takes work. You know, it's not as simple as someone's always going to call you and be like, hey, bud, let's go out and do something.
Right.
Like, you also have to be proactive yourself.
Right.
Is that something that
you
do?
It has to be a two-way street.
Right.
Friendship, you know, that's going to last has to be a two-way street. There has to be some give and take, you know, for a friendship to last. You know, sometimes they begin over professional interests, like the old farts, photographers of the North Shore.
Yes.
Or hobby interests, like Boston pen people. You know, there are people in there who are very serious collectors. There are people in there who are neophytes. That led into also my involvement with the Commonwealth Pen Show, which happens once a year here in the area. You know, I'm the showrunner for that. And so I've built a team over the last 8 years, 9 years, that work with me on the show, and we make sure that it runs smoothly for everyone involved. The two organizers also have a table, and so they're busy with that, which is how I came to be involved in the show. You know.
And so you're already doing this, it would seem, but in this article, she also mentions using activities to your advantage, right? Because we kind of touched on that earlier, because you're so active, you're busy, and your work constantly keeps you around people, new people at that.
Absolutely.
But, excuse me, she also mentions, like, if you play a sport, if you play poker, but even if you do none of those things, find something, find a group, like you mentioned, and participate, sign up, and you might be pleasantly surprised, you know? I mean...
You know, when I was a kid, there seemed to be more outlets for men, not necessarily healthy in the way we look at the world today, but you know, you had bowling leagues, you had softball leagues, you had, well, the Masons are still around, KFC is still around, but you had Moose and Elks and all these other fraternal organizations, you know, that were outlets, I think, for men, more so than there are today. Men are kind of on their own, you know, today. They don't have these clubby sort of things that used to be there, where they would get together once a week for whatever reason, you know.
Okay, so these things, they're all important. Every little bit helps, is my understanding. But she does touch lightly on the idea that, for example, if you play a sport, that right there, you're going to have interaction. That's an activity.
Right.
But she also mentions potentially keeping in mind that with an activity, you're not going to have the heart-to-heart conversations. You're not going to necessarily find the vulnerability.
Right.
You still have the interaction, which is positive.
Right.
But if you want a more meaningful, lasting friendship, because you can have a friend and sit on the couch together and watch a Patriots game, let's say, but you don't have one conversation about anything, like, you know, this is troubling me, I'm stressed at work, you know, things are going a certain way at home with the family. But she mentions, again, just activities in general. Try a lunch, everyone, like, do those activities, but keep in mind those, again, we're trying to touch on vulnerability. So sometimes we need, like, have a lunch or have some drinks or some place where there's kind of some quiet to do that. So even though you're doing all these things, does that resonate at all? Is that something
one of my
that
friends and
happens?
colleagues I introduced to brothers some years ago, and so it is an imperative that he come to brothers on a regular basis, and we have breakfast, and we talk about whatever is there to talk about at the time, you know, and often it's history, because he has an interest in history, and you know, so, but at the same time also, using brothers as another analogy, the opportunities are there. Now, we started talking at the Chamber of Commerce breakfast, which happens once a month at Brothers. And, you know, there's an opportunity to meet a lot of different people there and get different points of view. And learn new things. You know, whether an individual takes that opportunity is another matter. And I think that might be part of the crux of what we're talking about here is, you know, are people necessarily, because there are people even within the Chamber of Commerce who are very outgoing, okay? There's a banker that comes to mind, very outgoing, and we always talk. I always make a point to have a few words with State Rep Wong when he's there. I've known Donald for many, many years, even before he was a state rep, and you know, so we catch up on what's what. So it's taking the opportunities and using them, I think, is a lot of it, you know, and you don't know where people will come from. We were alluding to a friend of mine, almost 45 years now, and we met totally by accident because of statues in Rockport, where I was living at the time. She's a sculptor, and we ended up running together for several years when my wife and I lived in Rockport, and you know, have kept in touch ever since. In fact, I documented a statue which she created. She was commissioned to create of herself in 1966 to honor all the women of the pre-sanctioned era, 66 through 71, and that will be going up near the starting line next spring. Right now is what it's scheduled for. But Bobby Gibb is, you know, has been a friend now for 45 years.
But see, now we take a slight detour, if you will. So, okay. And I don't want to throw a blanket statement on this here. Okay, so for a good number of men who are married, now I'm going to go down the married path here, a lot of them, their limited social outlet, if they don't have a lot of male friends, is usually the biggest social connection that they might have could be their significant other, right? And then not a whole lot else. So now, you know, we have the feminine element that comes in. We have the significant other, or whomever that might be. I don't want to be non-exclusive here if it's same sex, but either way, your partner, whoever your partner is.
Yeah.
So then, you know, all that being said, now you talk about male-female friendships, right? And developing those going forward. If you're already in a relationship, you have a significant other, you have a partner, but now you're building again outside of the relationship. A lot of men do not have that either, and that can be challenging to a relationship. New friendships can be positive, but then that could be a challenge. So obviously, like you said, you've never had difficulty with that. You are married. Your wife does not have difficulty with that, and you were actually expressing that to me earlier. Also, the relationship, the long-time relationship you've had.
Yep.
And you walk dogs together?
I have a neighbor up the street whose dog is my dog's best friend.
Okay.
And their predecessors were also best friends. So
Okay.
we've been walking most evenings for 8 years now. And, you know, it's a nice, we do power walking. We do anywhere from 3 to 5 miles in an evening. And, you know, it's a way of getting a different point of view.
Okay. All right.
Is
It doesn't
what it
have to
is.
be anything. It can be platonic. That's the word I'm looking for.
It absolutely
You don't have to
can.
be anything that's outside
No.
of that. It is a possibility.
No. And that's why when you sent me a list of questions of topics to talk about, you know, I saw that one and my immediate reaction was, I don't get that. You know, that it isn't possible. Because, yeah, it is possible. Very much so. And it depends on the attitude of the individual, I'm sure. You know, it may not be an easy thing in our society. It might be, you know, easier in some of the European societies. I don't know. But it's not impossible, you know. And it gives one a different perspective. You know?
For balance, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, for all the people who are going to watch this and go, oh, please, like, what is he talking about? Like, yeah, right. I mean, because honestly, I hear it across the city right now. I can hear people like, yeah, like, that's not me. There's no way you're going to get me to do that. That's never going to happen. That's not going to happen.
It's not something that can be forced. It's either organic or it isn't.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And
I would say you also need to be open to it.
yeah.
I think that's part of it. It has to be organic, but it's my opinion that I think being open is important to this whole.
But ultimately,
matter.
isn't that what life experience is all about? Is being open to the life experience?
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
I mean, that is what life is in
Yeah.
my mind? A long string of moments and events that are put together that pretty much make up the whole, what is our life or lives.
Yeah.
And again, that's my belief. But I mean, it's extremely difficult for so many people to do that, and it's like, how do you make that first step? And then even then, you know, one of the last things that is mentioned in the article is harness the power of casual check-ins. You know, don't be afraid to text and check in and say, hey, how you doing? What's up? How things looking? And then maybe take it further, and here we go, we back up. Want to get a cup of coffee? Want to meet up, take a walk?
Yep.
You know, like, again, it seems like something so simple, but it's very, very challenging for so many. Like, it seems that it needs to be super easy.
Right.
Someone needs to come knock on your door and be like, hey, you want a drink? I got glasses.
And I don't understand whether that is cultural or societal, or is it just the way that men and women were brought up.
I think it's
You know,
all of the above. I think it's a combination of all of the above.
you know,
And
I think for my age group, it might be a little more daunting because we were brought up in the 50s and 60s.
mm-hmm.
All right, I'm 69 years old,
Okay.
and you know, the genders were very much more separated from each other
Mm-hmm.
until the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and then things just really started to change in radical ways. And whether people were able to change with that and morph into that new world or not is another matter. But and the world has continued to change because norms that were considered socially acceptable in the 50s and early 60s
Mm-hmm.
aren't there anymore. Okay, and I think to some people the world today may be more daunting.
Because I was going to say those norms aren't there anymore, but now what have they been replaced with? They've been replaced with something, I feel like, less social though. Even though those norms,
Oh, I have to agree.
you know, it's something else. And this is where the whole, I mean, the statistics are changing on
Right.
these things for people, and hence more mental health awareness is starting to come in. And I mean, there's what, in 2021, there was a
Mhm.
survey of more than 2,000 adults in the United States. Less than half of the men said they were truly satisfied with how many friends they had, while 15% said they had no close friends at all, which is a
Which is sad.
five-fold increase since 1990.
Yeah.
Like
That's
that's
sad.
that's a stat. Like it is.
Yeah, that's very sad.
So what's happening? And we haven't done this. This will be a different show. But now we run into mental health. Like, you know, not that it didn't exist before, but you know, I don't hesitate to think that this has to exacerbate some of that in some way too.
How much of that I'm in the way that I've always worked, I'm not technological at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and in fact, there are several friends who will rag me on that fact. You know,
Yeah, I know how you feel.
but I mean, when I write an article, I write it in longhand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I never learned to type because when I was in high school, I wasn't allowed to learn to type
Right.
because I wasn't in business course. I was in college prep course. But, and yes, I do use modern technology. My cameras are digital nowadays. My phone is an iPhone. And so there is that element, but I don't spend my days on social media.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm on the computer, I'm either editing photos or I'm working on a project, and that's it. You know, has that further isolated individuals from being social? You know, you can't be social on social media. Zoom is not a way to really get to know someone.
Right.
You know, how much has technology had a negative effect on people and on people building friendships? People were much more social when I was younger than they are today.
I think that this is very true.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, these are questions that we ask, and I think going forward, it's something that we're going to have to continue to work and strive toward making things better and helping ourselves. This is about also helping yourself and
Oh, yes.
getting outside of your comfort zone. Just because you're comfortable, again, sometimes you got to make yourself a little uncomfortable for change
Right.
and for growth. But we're going to wrap up soon, but what I will ask you is, do you have a last bit of advice before we go for anyone out there who's alone or lonely or feels like they're alone and probably could benefit from being around more people, making friends, or just stepping into something altogether different? Any recommendation you would give?
Find an interest that one is passionate about and find a way find other people who are into that interest.
Mm-hmm.
And that at least might be a start,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Quite often I photograph events. I did Angel Fund Gala recently, and I've done others. And one of the things I observe, to your point, is that this group is talking to each other, this group is talking to each other, but there's no mingling.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a lot more mingling,
Mm-hmm.
and there doesn't seem to be any more. Force yourself to mingle. Force yourself to say, hey, you know, tell me about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you do? What are you interested in?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's the easiest way to start a conversation, you know.
Mm-hmm.
What's your passion?
I love it.
And that might start something. Yes, it takes courage.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it takes a certain amount of, yeah, I want to do this,
Okay.
you know. But it's taking that first step, and when you find out it isn't so difficult, maybe it becomes a life habit.
Okay. So that's what we're going to go with.
Mm-hmm.
Force yourself to mingle. Take that step. I love it. I know after all that, that's what I got. Force yourself to mingle. But at any rate, I think that's awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank
spending
you very
time with
much.
us. I hope this helps. You know, if someone actually wants to reach out to you,
Yep.
work with you, or anything like that, how can they find you?
They can find me on my website, which is www.dwattsjr.com.
Mm-hmm.
And all the information is there. Portfolios are there, and
Okay. Awesome.
you know, so that's the easiest way to get me.
Okay.
Or you know, they can also contact WCAT, and they'll send my contact information.
Excellent. Again, thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you
This was a
very
lot
much.
of fun.
This was hopefully people will get something out of it.
That's the goal here. That is the goal. It was great seeing you. We'll see you next time. Welcome to Bear Fitness. I'm your host, Laura, and we'll see you next time.